Who are you?
Which day?
Today, who are you?
Today, I'm a Gemini, see? So sometimes I'm David, and sometimes I'm Bendeth.
Ooh.
And sometimes I'm David Bendeth.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the beautiful East End of London. I was born in Hackney, which is the East End, Hackney Wick. Then I moved outside a little bit to Walthamstow and then to Essex. So that's where I grew up. And then I moved, well, I didn't move. My parents moved to Canada, to Toronto, which is why I'm wearing this wonderful Toronto Maple Leafs hat.
So you don't have an accent. So you spent your formative years in Canada.
Yeah, high school and junior high, yes.
Okay. And how was that?
Well, it was the Beatles, and it was, Led Zeppelin and Cream. It was fantastic. High school was intense for me. I had a lot of very creative people in my class and in my school. In my school was Howie Mandel and Geddy Lee from Rush.
Whoa.
And Alex Leifson from Rush. And
in your high school?
In my class. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was an art school. And bands were playing live all the time. And, we talked a little bit before about Joni Mitchell. And I used to go down to Yorkville and stand outside the club, see Neil Young, Joni Mitchell playing. Rick James was actually playing with Neil Young when I saw him. He was the bass player with Neil Young. They were called the Mina Birds.
Oh, wow.
So I came up in this real 60s hippie and then kind of rock, Led Zeppelin, Mountain, era, and was really, really cool. I started to play guitar when I was like 13, 14. My parents did not want me to do music at all. My father's a doctor, so he really broke my guitar. Actually, physically did. He didn't want me anywhere near it. And I was in bands playing different high schools by that time. I actually was playing in bars when I was 15, 16. And then I decided to go on a vacation before I went to college. Well, I went back to London. That vacation ended up with me not coming home and not telling my parents and not having to go to college. And I got a job in a record store in Haymarket Corner in Piccadilly. And then I started to audition for groups as a guitar player. I played with Sparks, the band Sparks. I played with, I used to play I was the house band in the house band at a place called the Speakeasy, which was the place in London. Everybody went there. All the famous musicians were a very small club. And I met everybody. I networked. I was, getting to the marquee. And that was it for me. And I stayed there until I was broke. And I came back to Canada, got a job in a music store, the most famous music store, Long and McQuaid's. And of course, around musicians again, and started to practice a lot more. And by that time, somebody had played me Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. I became a complete jazz snob. Herbie Hancock, Mahavishnu, Chick Corea, Return to Forever. That was my thing. And I started to write. And then I got a record deal with CBS Records, Epic, where I made an instrumental album. That's what they wanted me to do, and that's what I did. And I got to the end, and the producer told me that I should do a vocal track just to add to it, which I did. And it became a #1 dance song in the UK, a fluke called Feel the Real. So that was how it all started, kind of playing and touring. And on my first album, I had Billy Cobham and Lenny White and Marcus Miller. I was 21, I think. It was pretty, and then we played and I toured with them.
That's amazing.
I played with Marcus. We played in New York a bunch of times. We used to play a club called McKell's, and then with Billy Cobham, I went on the road with Billy Cobham, playing guitar.
As the lead singer and
no, there was no singing. It was all instrumental, both of them. Okay. Well, there was a little bit of singing, but not really the way you and I.
Feel the Real, you sang.
No, but I was playing. We didn't do it. We played instrumental shows. They were all fusion shows. One of the shows, the second time I think I played, we did vocal. We did vocals too. We had a section of the show that we did 5 vocals.
But so people would come to see you because they heard Feel the Real, and then you wouldn't play during the show?
Correct, because I didn't sing Feel the Real. I sang backgrounds on Feel the Real. That was sung by Bob Boyer. who wrote the song with me. And there were some guys that I knew from like hanging around in him and his brother Fred and this guy Kung Fu were the singers.
There was a singer named Kung Fu.
Well, his real name was Selwyn Pitt, but we always called him Kung Fu. He's a great guy, actually. Really good singer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was it. I started to write. And then I signed to another label called Ensign, which was the Boomtown Rats and the Waterboys, that label, Sinead O'Connor. And I made a record for them, and it was great. And then I was touring. I was off on the road, touring the world.
And then what happened?
What happened was I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be. And there was an A&R guy at Capitol Records in Canada called Dean Cameron, and he said, I think you should go to England. You've got some great songs. You should put a band together. So I went to England, and they gave me 8 months at Abbey Road in the penthouse. And I put a band together with Pino Palladino on bass, Tony Beard, the drummer. Simon Climby was the singer who wrote I Knew You Were Waiting for Aretha Franklin and Eric Clapton. And then Rob Fisher from a band called Naked Eyes. He was the keyboard player. God bless, he's passed on. So that was the band. We got a deal immediately with Universal in LA, but nobody wanted to move to America. So they were like, you have to move to England. And I said, I'm not doing that. And that was the end of it. But one of the songs that I wrote with Simon ended up to be one of the best things that could happen to me. And that was Jeff Beck did it. Flash record, People Get Ready. Yeah, that was my goal in life when I was 13, to have Jeff Beck do one of my songs. And Joe Cocker, I wrote Joe Cocker's song with Eddie Schwartz called Two Wrongs Don't Make a Right, which ended up to be a huge hit as well.
Great song.
Thank you.
You seem to have a knack for being at the right place at the right time.
I would go out to support other bands. I would go out to see people. I would want to learn. I wanted to meet people. And certainly I was I would go up to people and say, you don't know me and I don't know you, but I'd like to meet you. And I was never shy because people always would, go on, just go over there. And sometimes it would be like, get lost, kid, because I'm just a kid. But when you're a kid, you don't really care as much. You just want to meet people and maybe they'll, hang out with you and talk to you about what they do. And I was very, very lucky. I was also in a studio environment at Phase One Studios in Toronto, where I was assisting and helping and hanging out and making my own records there in early 1980. And you have to understand that it was Randy Staub and it was Bob Ezrin, Jack Richardson, Garth Richardson, a guy Joe Primo, Scott Humphrey, some of the biggest rock producers in the world. I was there at that time for like 6 or 7 years, watching everybody and hanging out and doing the sessions. So that was the place. I could honestly say that I was at the right time and the right place to learn my craft, because I would watch and ask questions. And I was told to shut up quite a lot. Bendeth, you ask too many goddamn questions. And sometimes they didn't like answering it. Like a lot of people get uncomfortable doing this. I always figured if I didn't know something, what's wrong with me asking? And I think people like the fact that I would want to know. I would love to tell you about my first experience with Jack Richardson and Bob Ezrin.
Hit it.
It was a dishwasher. Basically, my job was to load and unload the dishwasher in the studio. And I'll never forget, they said, well, first of all, there's a way to load the dishwasher. Like all of the plates go here, and then all of the small plates go here, and the forks go together. I don't do that now. All the knives go together and the spoons go together, blah, blah, blah. And then on top is the mugs, and they've got to be upside down so that the water doesn't go inside. This crazy stuff. I just put the stuff in the dishwasher the way I did with my mom and dad, which is, who cares? And I got screamed at. And I remember, I think it was Jack or Bob going to a back room and pulling out a 5-page, this is how you load the dishwasher. And this is how you unload it. And you have to wipe them before you put them back. But all of the cups go here and all the glasses go here. And if you don't put it this way and there's no germs on anything, like you're done your job, and they would check off if you did it. So I remember, I think it was Jack said to me, you probably think I'm crazy for doing that. I said, yeah, actually, that's crazy. Like, that's just the dishwasher. He goes, well, if you don't know how to load a dishwasher and unload one, you won't be able to come in the room and figure out what a vocal chain is. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. There's not two ways. And there's only two kinds of songs, Bendeth: a good song and a bad song. So it was very all cut and dried, you know. It was political. And everybody, you have to be careful what you say in the kitchen, and you have to be careful what you said in the room, because you didn't know what PZM was stuck to the bottom of the console, because they were with the cassette player. And if you said something, there was this chain of command. And again, I remember working a session with the producer, and the guitar player looked at me and he said, "What did you think of my solo?" And I'm like, "It was pretty good, right?" And the producer just looked at me and he went, "Go ahead, answer him." And I went, I realized it was a no-win. If I said it was good and he disagreed, the producer disagreed, I was done, finished. And if I said it was terrible, that it was ruining the session. And I realized at that moment to shut my mouth and say, it's the producer's decision. I'm just an assistant. But I would have loved to have answered, but I knew that I couldn't. And then I came to New York, and when I worked with Lenny, and I hung out at Atlantic Studios and watched Arif Mardin do his thing and was on some Shaka Khan sessions. I was at Unique Studios, and I was at a lot of different studios. Hit Factory back then was a smaller place called Bell Studios. Prince was upstairs. He was like 15, 16. So I remember that whole era really well. Late 70s or 77. But it was always New York to me. It was always, those studios are the best. Those mastering houses are the best. Nothing against Canada, because they had wonderful studios too. But I worked many times in Morin Heights at Andre Perry's studio. It was fantastic in the middle of the woods. And I loved working there too. But it was very opposite for Atlantic Studios in New York.
There's an edge in New York.
Yeah, I love that edge.
Yeah.
I fit in really well.
Yeah, I can tell. So you have a pretty wild discography.
Yeah, I do.
Do you remember a turning point in your career? Like one thing that you did that just changed everything?
Yes. I remember growing up in England when I was young and listening to these radio shows called Favorites. And basically it would be like Cliff Richards, Nat King Cole, Petula Clark, Dusty Springfield, Dave Clark Five, all of these groups, and they were all different. But I remember loving listening to this incredible up and down soul music to pop music to ballads. And I was like, oh, that's music. It's not one thing. It's not just guitars it's like it's music. And the BBC Orchestra was on all these records, and they were incredible. I mean, you could tell from Coronation Street on down, they had the most incredible arrangements. So I remember growing up in an environment where my mother especially played me Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, but Tubby the Tuba. She taught me the orchestra when I was 3 or 4. She taught me every instrument. She played piano. So I was very lucky to have that. When it moved into my own career, one of my goals was to not do one thing. And I felt like if I could do rock and soul and pop and a bit of country and a bit of everything, that as I did all of those things, it would make me a better musician, better understand groove, especially that. So I'd say the time it all came together was right around when I was about 18 or 19, and I learned groove. The ability to be able to list the subdivisions, upbeats, all of the things that give something a feel. I had some pretty good teachers in the groove department, that gave me the ultimate life lessons. And you're playing this ahead, you're playing this wrong. And I had to really take a long, hard look at myself. So I would attribute a lot of it to people basically cutting me down to size as far as my ability goes, and saying you're playing reggae wrong. That's not how it goes. It goes like this. This is the feel. As a guitar player, I had a problem playing ahead. All guitar players want to hear themselves first. Mm-hmm. So when I came to mixing as well as recording, I wanted to go from vertical horizon to bring me the horizon. And I wanted to go from Bruce Hornsby to Breaking Benjamin. I felt that becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none, in my instance, was going to be really good for my producing career, because it would allow me to do different things. Because the truth is, I am pegged as a rock producer for the most part. I mean, if you look at my discography, it's like guitars, vocals, screaming, all of this. It's great, and I love it all. But is that what I do? I go home and put on, whatever? No, of course not. I can't stand it to leave home. So I have music that I listen to that's on my playlist that has been the same my whole career. It all has something in common. It makes me feel really good. I always am searching for that spiritual moment where I become at peace with music. And so I've tried to listen to as much music as I can and go to as many different concerts as I can.
How did you turn into a professional producer?
I was already producing at that time. I'd produced my first project I took on was a band called the Extras, which were like a local new wave band. And I had a live sound man that I learned a lot from. He was from South Africa. And he was a great, brilliant guy. He was in England the same time I was. And he moved to Canada to get away from something, but he did. And I met him, and he became my live sound guy as I was touring for 6 years. And then one day he said to me, I'm going to do live sound for Anne Murray. And then that moved to Yes. And that moved to Stevie Wonder. And his name is Paul de Villiers. And then he ended up producing Mr. and mixing Mr. And then he produced Yes, the Machine record. And then he disappeared off the face of the earth. And I speak to him all the time. He has one phone. But that's how I learned. And he also engineered and mixed with me my own record, my second record. But Paul was very, very good with sound. As you can see, the artist he worked with for many years. He's a genius. And so I always surrounded myself as much as I could and with people that were way better than I was at everything. It came to a point after touring for many years that I had a child and I needed to be there. And at the same time, I wasn't making money. So I was offered a job at CBS Records as a staff producer, which I took. And that was a real eye-opener. Now I'm on the corporate side. And it's 1984. I'm writing for Chrysalis as a writer, so I've got that part of it. Okay, it's not that bad. You can still write. And it was a difficult transition, to be honest, like working in corporate, especially CBS, which were really strict about everything. And I worked there for a few years, and I discovered Katie Lang, the singer, and they refused to sign her because she didn't write her own songs. And I really got disappointed quickly. I said to them, if you don't let me sign her, I'm going to quit. And they said, goodbye, goodbye. And that was my first disposable moment working for a record company. I did do some records for them, though, while I was there. And then I got offered within a week another job working for a company called BMG, which was a German company, and they were wanting to expand the company. It was Arista and RCA, and it was called BMG. And they offered me a job to be an A&R person and a staff producer. Of course, at that point, I had some musical knowledge, and I was quite willing to take some chances. And so the first group I signed was the Cowboy Junkies. And then I signed the Crash Test Dummies. And so all of a sudden, we're this little company that's doing nothing, and we're blowing up around the world. And the company did an incredible job breaking these artists. I mean, you can imagine we were not making anything, and all of a sudden, all this fame and fortune came through these artists, not to the company, but to these, to the fact that they were touring. They were on Saturday Night Live. These are two little Canadian bands no one had ever heard of. So it was awesome. I was rewarded by being transferred to New York in 1995. I'd been there for 8 years at that point, and I moved to RCA Records, where I signed Vertigo Horizon, and I signed SR-71, punk pop group, and I worked with Bruce Hornsby. I produced one of his records and mixed and played guitar on his records. So that, to me, working with, Bruce Hornsby was not a big stretch for me at all. Whereas most people, like, Bruce is intimidating. He's incredible. And he had his own studio in his house with the big Neve console, and the console they used for AC/DC is in his house. So I worked there for about 8 months with Bruce, and that was a real lesson in everything. He was very, very, very knowledgeable and very, very asked me great questions. Like, I would have to sort of go through everything I did and tell him what I was doing. And so I've been lucky, to be around that much talent where I could really focus on doing what I do because they were so good at what they did. It allowed me. And the thing is, you don't want to tell them how to do their job, because guys that do that really, really well, you don't have to tell them anything. They just do it. They're already thinking way ahead of you, and you can focus on getting the performance, and you can focus on, putting it all together in your head through a mix, or you can focus on strategizing how to deal with the artist and the manager and the label and all that crap that goes with it. So it's always been a team, and I've never, ever thought it was different.
You left RCA?
Yeah. Well, I got let go of RCA. I left with 73 of 110 people. I was proud. They told me that I was a senior VP, that I could just go home and they would deliver all of my things to my house by FedEx. Clive Davis had come back to the company and he wanted me to do some things I didn't want to do musically. But I lined up with all of those 73 people to get my slip. A lot of us left that day. There was a slaughter. And I just finished this Elvis record. I probably made the company about $200 million. And they owed me a lot of money and they didn't want me. So it was the greatest thing that ever happened. Thank you, RCA. I spent the next 15 years probably doing the same thing I did with my own father, who didn't believe. Oh yeah, you want to see some fireworks? And that became a mission. I think people do a lot of things for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's love and passion, and sometimes it's to learn, and other times it's straight up revenge. And if you get the wrong person who knows way too much in a position like that, they're going to go on a tear. What I was able to do at that point, after I left RCA, was pick who I wanted to work with and go after them and let it be known, and then take that tear. One year we had 5 platinum records in a row. The first one, it's like, oh, that's pretty good. Hey, congratulations, man. Hey. And the second one, it was like, yeah, you kind of got lucky with the second one. Pretty good though. Yeah. And the third one was like, wait a minute. Well, okay, hold on. Is it that good? Wait a minute. Well, who cares? You get into that thing where you have to win. We went on a tear. I say we because it was a team and it had moving parts. It was never David Bendeth. It was always the team. I knew better. I'd watched everybody else work. It was a great thing, but it was also dangerous because eventually that wave would come to the shore and go down. And that was tough. Like, okay, how do I get back on that wave? And then I would find a way to get back somehow. So it kind of looked like 4 years of this, and then the wave would come down, and then it would pick back up again, and it would go back down. And I would say over a period of 10 to 12 years, we amassed 30 to 40 platinum gold records. And so I never looked at it as though it had an ending. And I still don't. That's why we're here.
Your A&R years, all 18 of them, were probably, besides the energy that you got from being wronged by the man, those A&R years and your knowledge of the system, we can call it a system, were probably very helpful in...
My God, yeah. Are you kidding?
Can you explain how the system works?
Yeah. So at the time, radio was king. So without radio, you really didn't have anything. And at that time was when I learned how important radio was and making songs commercially viable to get onto the radio, because the radio guys would always take the straightest line. The easiest way to get a song on the radio would be its appeal. Back then, there was no way to find out. So you had to get it played and get a reaction from the audience. So yes, I was in many meetings with people that didn't know anything about music. The ability to work at a record label and know what they were going to do next helped me pick singles, helped me when I was mixing. Yes, I would sit there and go, okay, this is going to the radio guy. This ending is too long. This beginning is too long. Or maybe we should make it longer. Maybe that's why, we're going to go to college radio. Maybe we should make the song 9 minutes. So that was the thing. I would think about an act from a marketing, sales, and promotion standpoint as much as I would about being a good producer. And I think that's why I've had commercial success. I know it is.
It's not just about the music,
No,
and that's crucial.
it is. And it's also about what your artist does best. You know, if you can bring the best out of the artist without them even knowing it, this is fantastic. Some artists work better than others when you go this approach because other artists don't want to be famous. I found that out. They're scared of being famous because of all of the responsibility that goes with it. And it's probably a good thing because some of them might kill themselves dealing with that kind of pressure, that kind of schedule. Then I think there's other artists that are made for that and they're lifers. And you and I have a generation of Frank Sinatra and B.B. King and people that toured right up until they were, you know, Las Vegas when you're 80 years old, or Leonard Cohen touring at 80. And the Rolling Stones, do they have to go on the road? Really? Why is Keith Richards and Mick Jagger and Ron Wood on the road? Well, maybe they have fun. Maybe they love playing Rolling Stones music. You're darn right they do. So I feel like some artists are cut out for it, and we've lost many that aren't. I've lost a lot of artists that I've worked with that shouldn't have been doing it. And it's sad. And it makes me sad when I see it, especially from that generation. I remember a lot of the music I made, people were starting to cut themselves and all sorts of terrible things. But I feel that you learn from each generation of music. And I think that's the thing. Being at a record label for me really helped me to understand what it is that people really want. And they want to be a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be a part of the band. They want to be part of the discovery of the band. They want to be a biggest fan of the band. It's like a sports team. It's like this. I grew up with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Even though we've lost, and I'm going to admit it on camera, it's still part of the team. I feel like music has become that a little bit more. You're either into this or into that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about passion. And I watch people in cars listening to music with the windows open and listen to songs that are coming out of their car and it's blasting and they're all singing it in the car. I'm at the beach and someone's playing something and I go, I worked on that. People have come up to me and said, you did that. I mean, it's happened even on this session.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really where you get thanked. And of course, watching the artist grow, being a part of that.
That's the best part.
It is the greatest part.
I love it.
Because we can stay behind the scenes. We can hide here. We can build our walls of gear and go, hey, this is cozy. But it isn't once it gets out of here. It's no longer ours. It's everybody's. And so we have to know the responsibility we have here to the music. Maybe not even the artist. Maybe the music.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have to produce a song or mix a song, we're really taking partial ownership momentarily. And then we know that we have to let go. We watch it fly or we watch it sink. It's painful either way because we know what the ramifications of either one is. But when it flies and it takes off and it has a life of its own, and you feel like a part of it because it's not one person that does that. We all know it's the engineer, it's the producer, it's the mixer, it's the band, it's the manager, it's the label. To ever think for 1 minute, there's one Stevie Wonder, there's one Prince, there's one John Lennon. You know, there's only so many people in the world that can do it all. And then there's everybody else. You know, we all realize now that we're never going to be that genius and we do the best we can within our realm, but we have to know what that is. And it always means that we have to learn every day. If we don't learn something every day, that's what it's all about. It's about making good, healthy mistakes so that you can come back in here and hopefully somebody will give you another shot to do it better.
What's your favorite part of the job?
My favorite things to do on a record, it's going to be a little bit weird. I love pre-production.
Mm-hmm.
I know right away whether that song has something going for it. Sometimes I'm wrong, but when I hear the singer sing it and I'm like, wow, this could be pretty cool. Like, I don't ever say a song's a hit because that's insane. That jinxes yourself. And I never ever think anything's a hit. But I think, well, pre-production's great. And I know that this song is got a lead start. I love recording drums so much. If it's a good drummer, there's nothing like listening back to a drum track and going, oh my God, did you hear them hit these drums? Listen to the way and it's just a $60 microphone. It's some shit 57, piece of garbage. And we're all like, oh my God, but that's the truth. It's just a $60 piece of garbage. But the way the drummer hits the snare with the right stick at the right place and the rim and then the cymbal and all of a sudden and it's still, we got the 421s. We're going to put the overheads. We got 414s and we got the ribbon mics at the back. Everything's perfect. It's going to be amazing because we think that's why it's going to be good, because we have the right color cable. But when that drummer hits, and it's dead on, those mics come alive. The console lights up like a Christmas tree. You're watching everything. It's all going exactly to the same place. Man, wow. And all you think about is, I don't have to edit this that much. I'm just going to leave this. This is that good. That feeling on a record, mind-boggling. I don't love doing guitar overdubs. I'm a guitar player, being honest. Bass, vocals, I love because it's emotional, and you can comp and you can have a singer go out and, walk around the block and come back in here and just kill something. Or you can have them go, I'm not good. My voice is gone. And they go, I'm going to come back tomorrow. And then they come back in and they just kill it. And when singers sing things they can't really sing, I always love that, because they'll do something that's risky and dangerous. And that kind of makes the song come alive. I love doing vocals. I love doing drums, love pre-production. Guitars, but keyboard overdubs, Guitar solos, oh God. It's so funny. Everyone does a guitar solo, and they'll do it like, I can't remember, a bunch of bands I work with some pretty darn good guitar players. But every good guitar solo I've ever done on a record has been like the third take or the second take. Like usually, if you don't get it by 5 or 10, you shouldn't be in the studio. Because it's all feel. It's, let's take this bar and put that bar. Once you do that, it's like the whole thing's finished. So I love guitar players that can just come in and just kill me. And of course, mixing for me has been magic. But I can tell you why. Like a lot of it, I like to be alone when I'm mixing. Like when we worked on the mix, it was really weird having 3 people, cameras and everything. I've never done that before, because it's always freaked me out that somebody could watch what I was doing. And for the main reason that I think a lot of what I do as I'm doing it is really stupid, because I'm experimenting and I'm doing things that somebody will go, what the hell are you doing that for? Why would you even think? Because I want to know what it sounds like without the overheads. I want to know what it sounds like without both basses and 3 basses. I want to hear just the DI in the verse, but as you're looking at why you record, I love to try 100 different things in the middle of a mix where no one's judging me. And if you were to watch me, I'm sitting here going, I talk to myself. I didn't talk to myself at all, but I do. I'm like, hey, that sounded really good. Oh, no, that sucks. You don't know what you're doing. You had it right 20 minutes ago. That's me mixing. And everyone's in another room usually going, what the hell is this? He's going crazy in there. How far is he? And they kind of peek their nose in. Is everything okay? A couple of times I've gone over there to the patch bay and I've ripped everything out of the patch bay 3 hours into a mix and put it on the floor. I'm normal, the whole console, like just that angry. That's humbling. Paying for the session, humbling, because you screwed it up. Good. The more mistakes I made, the better I got. I love most an artist listening to a playback of their song and going, wow, I never thought that song could get there. And when that happens, I feel like Willy Wonka. That's what I feel like. Not for any other reason that I've just given somebody the best chocolate that they've ever eaten, and that becomes the standard for the rest of their life. That makes me feel good. And I get to the end of it and I listen to it and I go, I'm being honest, how the hell did I do that? And I don't know. But I do know that they played a huge role in me and how I reacted to them and what I wanted to give them by the more communication that we had.
What, in your opinion, does it take for a song to cut through the filter? And you know what I mean by the filter,
Yeah.
to reach a wide audience?
It's easy. There's only one thing. It needs a great groove. If it has a great groove, you're halfway home. Always. If the song does not breathe and have a groove, it's nothing. And that's the key.
How does it feel to make a record for an unknown artist after you made a record for a huge superstar?
I love it. One of my biggest fears of doing quite well was having old artists call me to make records. The Elvis thing was such a great experience for me. It really was wonderful. For the main reason that he was, unfortunately, had passed. And it didn't do one thing for my career. It didn't get me one gig. And it was one of the biggest records it was his biggest record of his career. And I produced it and mixed it, but I didn't really because it had already been done. When somebody says, well, you did Breaking Benjamin, so you should do, I don't know, I'm just going to use a name, 3 Days Grace, because you did, there's a part of that really scares me. Because you have to understand that I never wanted to do this many rock records. The fact that I kept getting called was like this place, a voice going, okay, you should do that. You're not getting called to do Earth, Wind, and Fire. You're not getting called to do, whoever that I love. That's Pat Metheny. I'd like to do a Lyle Mays, Pat Metheny records. Yeah. Like I'd be there at the studio, like waiting at the door at 3:00 in the morning. Let me in, And so the rock records kept coming and they kept coming. And I took to work, but it wasn't where my heart was musically. But I followed what was given to me. It was a battle to sort of think about what is the right thing. And I decided what the right thing was to stop following what I think is the right thing and go where the songs lived. And so if I listened to a band, I would go, well, that song is special. They were the kids. The songs were the kids. And my whole thing was like, okay, if it's a young band and they walk in the room, I have a duty and a responsibility to help them deliver that. And I always loved working with young bands way before anything old. And I've only got a few, actually there's 3 or 4 artists that I repeated on, 3s and 4s. And I would seek out young artists because as an A&R person, that was my job, to find the next young artist. And so I always looked at it that way. One year I did Bring Me the Horizon, Asking Alexandria, and Mice and Men within 5 months of each other. That was insane. But my gut told me to do those records immediately because they were just about to break, all of them, and they did. I loved the idea of being a part of the success of something because to me, that was the real deal. And especially if the artist was good and deserved it.
How does it feel to have turned your passion into a business?
I don't really look at it. I mean, it is a business. I get it. But the truth is I don't really get to enjoy my business at all. I never did. I didn't come from anything. I was never an Armani suit guy. Driving a Ferrari always scared the hell out of me in case somebody scratched it at the supermarket. I'm being honest now. I come from like very poor background. So for me, anything that I would get, I never really spent on myself anyway, and I could have cared. I never went on 3, 4 vacations a year. I just worked because that's the background I come from. So I've never really appreciated anything I've ever done. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. I mean, and that's been a real big mistake, a terrible mistake, because that's what happens in music. You get caught up in it and you forget, wait a minute, I've got kids. Oh yeah, right. If I've made any mistake, it's that. So the business side of things hurts. Art and commerce do not meet at all. There's no middle ground. Knowing what I learned as this, I call them the 7 careers that I've had, because it's been very clear to me there's 7, now there's 8, but it's always been all of them at different times. So as I went through, I started as a guitar player. I went to be a songwriter. I then ended up to be a touring artist. I went to be a mixer, a producer. Went on to be a songwriter. Went on to be a record company A&R guy, and then a writer all the time. I've been signed to publishing companies since 1980. I'm with Cobalt now, and now I teach I teach the master's course at Berkeley, and I'm in here mixing and I'm writing songs. It's never been one thing. I think that's the reason I've lasted so long. I think doing one thing is dangerous because you don't really learn much. And so I've always tried to do things I can't do. That's the truth. I mean, I made a hip hop plugin of all my loops last year. And I did it with Frank Dukes, who's like the best in the business. I made my own hip hop pack. Went to Toronto, worked with people that work with Drake and The Weeknd and all his crew, and young, extremely talented people. That was an eye-opener. I spent like 3 weeks. That's what I did. We put out the loop pack, and it was incredible. Making plugins. This is 2004. I made my first plugin in 2014, long before anybody, was doing this. On my Stephen Slate drum pack. I mean, that was done. And he was like, you got to do this drum pack. And I was like, I don't want to do it. And finally I said, you know what? Somebody was selling my drum samples for $20 online. So yeah, but the business is ugly. It is disgusting. And people just rip you off. And there's a hidden agenda. And I'm so glad that my record company, when I was 19, went bankrupt. And the head of the company got arrested for making counterfeit British Airways tickets and went to jail. And I had to get all my tapes back, which are still at my house, from the receivers, and pay a lawyer at 20, and then sign as a songwriter. I learned a lot of things quick when I had to learn them by accident, and they really hurt. And I think those are all pivotal moments in people's lives. You got to get your bell rung really bad. I talk to producers and mixers today that don't do contracts. They don't even have a little letter between them. What are you going to do if that artist sells 5 million copies? The guy's going to say, you never said anything to me about that. I paid you, shut up. And they would be right. Not to mention that most people think that producers and mixers and songwriters should work for free. And so should guitar players and drummers should work for free. God forbid we should want to feed our families. God forbid that we should want to get paid, by Spotify, a decent living so that we can all make music and survive. Yeah, I hate the business. Spotify are not in the music business. Neither is Apple. They're in the streaming business. And I get it. When I worked at the labels, it was very painful for me as an artist, going, wow, you're going to bury that artist? They haven't even come out yet. I don't like them. Pull the plug, I've seen it. It's a very difficult business to be in without a very thick skin.
Let's do a short thing on fixing, not mixing, and the waste of time.
Fixing is when a project comes in the door that you have to either do additional production on, or you have to edit before you before you mix. And so a lot of people take these projects on where somebody who has recorded it didn't really do their job that well. So your job is to do that. I call them Frankensteins. That's the way they come. They come in the door on a stretcher, and your job is to, give them everything they can, a blood transfusion, everything to make them alive. It doesn't mean they're ever going to be good. It just means you fixed it. But remember, if it was never that great to begin with, you're not really fixing anything. You're just polishing a turd. And there's a lot of polishing going on. In some instances, it's great to get the artist to come back in and redo the vocal. Or to redo the drums. I'm all for that if you can make the song better. But once you do that, you're opening up a can of worms. Once you make something sound good, and it's the first track that comes in the door of a mix of 15 songs, you got a real problem. You're going to have to do that to every song. And maybe you don't feel like it. Maybe you don't want to fix a song and then mix a song. And also, when you're fixing a song, the artist isn't there. How do you know they're going to like it? You might have completely different taste. In fact, if the producer wanted it that way, You know, when I listen to the Paramore Misery Business snare, there's a tone in there. I heard it when I recorded it. And like, I've had engineers say to me, well, why is there a tone? It's a wrong note. I go, because it sounded good. You know, but I could have taken that tone today and put it in the same key as the song. Well, because that's what you would have done, because the wallet wasn't down enough on it, or there's not enough tape on it. So that's my point. You're guessing. Highly dangerous to edit. What I would do if it was me was I would spend 2 weeks editing the record and tuning the record and timing the record and then mix it. If you're doing both at the same time, you're insane.
You made a note that you want to talk about unity gain, full dynamic range, and what that means.
Full dynamic range is a lot to do with time alignment and has a lot to do with the way things arrive at your ear. Now, if you get a song and it's produced a certain way, or you noticed immediately that the vocals are ahead and the guitars are ahead and they're fighting with the snare because that's the same register, exactly that frequency of the snare drum is where the vocal is. Or if you've got a piano that's playing up high with high background vocals, things starting to compete in the mix. And, you know, they say dynamics is also EQ as well. You can add EQ. I've always found, and there's a million engineers that would completely argue with me, but EQ, adding top end to things that doesn't have it is not adding top end, it's adding noise. It's adding crap to something that was never done right to begin with. So that's where the fixing comes in. So getting to your question, which is time align, it's where things arrive at your ear so that you have separation, you can hear them. Now, if you're doing a grunge band, it doesn't really matter. In fact, if you're doing the Sex Pistols or Nirvana, you would want it to be a little funky. Who needs to edit that? Because that's how the music goes. But if it has any sort of, you know, fantastic audio illusion, then you better make sure that it arrives, the top end, the lower mids, upper mids, bottom, at the same time at your ear. And the only way to do that is, what I do is I move things completely until I hear them. One of the very first things a singer does when they do a vocal, a live singer is going to sing ahead because that's what they want to hear themselves first out of the monitors. They want to beat the band to the punch. But in the studio, I take those singers that are 20 to 30 milliseconds, you know, they're racing down the clock, and I'll move them 15 to 20 milliseconds behind the click. And they look at me and they go, I just got really loud. How did you do that? Well, I moved you out of the way. You know, now you're sitting right where the kick and stairs, getting back to the groove argument. This is very, very important. Full dynamic range means that the music feels right as it's hitting your ears. If you've got too much top end and you've got fizzy guitars and you've got a lot of high end on your vocal and it's screeching and there's lots of distortion, there's certain records I can't listen to just because it really bothers me. Some of those records are multi-platinum and people love them because of that reason. I've done some of those records and I can't listen to them because they're wrong. They're wrong technically for me. So I prefer to listen to things where I can hear the artistry. I love that. I also love to drive to the beach and listen to something that's just like putting on a Van Halen record, listening to Ted Templeman, the separation, the way he's got the guitar panned, 2 o'clock, you know, and he brings it in. There's nothing stereo about it. The way the vocal sits, the way the guitar solo, where's the guitar solo, reverb the other side. All of these tricks to make it feel like I'm in a room. Watching that group is why I love the music. This is why Glenn Johns is so great. This is why, you know, Ted Templeman is so great, because they understand what live music is like because they've been to a show. And that's what we're trying to create. Once you get into Steely Dan and the perfection of music, or even to a certain degree Earth, Wind and Fire, there's an art form to that that's a completely different art form. And you have to understand what both of them are. This is another thing. I've spent my life listening. I go home after mixing for the day and I listen to music. You know, that's what I do.
Tell me about your 8-second rule.
My 8-second rule is when I'm mixing or I'm recording. I listen to certain records that I love, and I try and find a common denominator. And all of these records have something intrinsic that gives them this, I can't even describe it because I would never think of it, but certainly it started maybe with the Beatles, when I would hear George Martin put in something like from a French horn, or I would hear a piano part come out, or I would hear an Arif Mardin record, and he knew arrangements so well, his arrangements were ridiculous. And so you're adding something, you're not changing your song, you're not changing the groove, you're not necessarily changing the melody, but you're enhancing it all. Maybe a shaker comes in. Maybe a background comes in underneath it all. Maybe there's a texture like Trevor Horn does, where there's just a sound and the reverb of that, but it comes out over here. Things that keep the listener engaged in music is the number one thing to be a mixer you need to do. My 8-second rule is every 8 seconds, something happens. Not that you would know. You listen to With or Without You by U2. You're listening to, I think it's either Steve Lillywhite or Daniel Lanois. There's this thing that goes on through the verse. It's just a pad. I call it a ghost pad, and I listen to that pad with that vocal and this, the pad's there, ghost pad. And I think of how important that ghost pad is when it comes in and how it takes the space, but there's nothing going on. But I wonder what it would be like without it. So I talk about this as if it was a floor. There's a noise floor, no different than when you have dead space on a record and you're listening and all of a sudden it's dead. You have to we used to put microphones in a room and just record the room so that you could put that in where there was nothing there. What is that? What is that? There's nothing there. Well, there is something there. Pink noise. Shh. Whatever that is, whatever it is, there's noise, buzz. So this is called a floor. And so I like to think of all my records as having some kind of a floor. And that 8-second rule, things coming in, things coming out, but they're not a big deal. It's subtle. That's what makes it great. All the greats knew subtlety to me. So I studied it a lot. Linkin Park was one of the groups I noticed, wow, this is very clever. Andy Wallace, you listen to the mix on this record and there's just things. It's imagination. You have to have imagination. So that's my 8-second rule.
Let's talk about this. Things have to move continually. That's in the same realm.
I've been doing this since I started mixing because I came up on the SSL. I started on an E series. I went straight from a Trident with parametric fader, A range. And then they got the SSL. Of course, the first thing you do with an SSL is you read the manual, which you don't want to read. It was this big. It still is, right? What I did was I screwed up a lot of stuff. Wouldn't remember things. Back then, there was no automation. It was all, VCA. Right. So, of course, the VCA makes a massive difference. But you can go into absolute trim and you move the fader. And so I loved it. I loved being able to control the fader back then by putting it in and being able to move it. And it gave me a feeling that, hey, I can make this do anything. I wonder what would happen if I made it sound live, because not everybody play. If you're in a studio, it's such an unnatural environment. You're playing. If you're in an arena, you boom, bah, and you're hearing bah. Well, in the studio, you have to make something do that. Well, yeah, but how much do you want to do it? How big is the stadium? How small is the stadium? So this idea of trim really excited me, and that's how I came up, moving in increments of 1s, 2s, and 3s. As I mixed very safe, once these faders are up, and you're looking at, okay, I want to make the guitars louder in the chorus. Okay, boop, they're up. And I go, well, they must be louder. But are they louder? Well, no. Why? Because the drums and the bass have to come louder. Now it feels like this. And then the vocal comes up and it's got to get a little bit louder. Maybe I'm going to take this master fader down. And when the chorus hits, 2, 3, 4, boom, dun, dun, and that's the chorus hitting. And now I'm back down slowly to the verse. These are tricks that you use. So you're using the console not as a console anymore. It's now my guitar. It's now my bass. It's now my drums. It's an instrument, and I'm playing this console as if I was a conductor in a band and what I want to hear as far as the audience goes. And if I do something with this and it doesn't move me, it's a bad mix. It's a bad idea. Every move that I do is something that has to happen. It's not I'm thinking about it. I think this might be okay. Or if I was another guy, I would do that. No, this has to happen. This has to happen. This has to happen. Now, this has to happen. The pre-chorus has to, the bridge is coming. It all has to be at my fingertips. This is what I do. Now, is it reasonable and realistic to mix like this? No, most people put everything up and they go into the box and they run the mix, and 5 minutes later, they get it to sound great, but there's nothing moving. Music doesn't stay static. Neither does your brain. Music moves. That's why I like, the records I like, because they change. They dynamically get loud and they dynamically get quiet. And some metal records get extremely, I love those records, the ones that are overbearing, just crushing your brain. And then, then there's a thing they go into. It's like music is supposed to take you on a voyage. And if it doesn't, it's failed. If the mixer's done it and they don't get that, it's failed. You can't make it static. You can't make it even. This is not L. This is not L. This is W, Z, B. It's going to change as you go. So I'm very passionate about moving faders because it's the only time I can control what's in my head. To my hand, these ideas are not accidental. These are from what I know I want to hear. And if I can't get it, I will do it for 2 hours until I figure out that goes, this goes, these have to go, these bass sounds, it's too much. I'll start moving stuff usually out of the way.
Recording with samples, what do you mean?
The minute you use samples, everything has to compete. Once you put drum samples, kicks, and snares, and you start, listening to your monitor mixes with samples in, you now have to record the bass and the guitar to the samples. How can you make your bass as big as your drum kit? This is such a big problem with mixing and people recording things. What ends up happening on certain projects is they'll give me the drums. They say, look, we love the drums, but do that thing you do, Bendeth. Do your drum, that drum thing. That's what I'm known for. And then they give you the guitars. Here they are. No DIs. Oh, okay. So you want me to make this huge drum kit? Yeah. And put it with these little guitars? Yeah. Why? Well, we love the guitars. Well, okay, but they don't go with my drum kit. My drum kit's about 10 sizes bigger than that. Your bass, not a problem. Tell the engineer, make a sub. Octave down, good. Pull that back, add it in just underneath. Just no different than a sub underneath. Take it, that same bass, mult it out, put it through this compressor, bury it, distortion. Thank you very much. Now we've got the big bass, huge drum sounds, lots of SPX 90. We've got, the AMS humming. I've got my sample in there. I've got the real drums in there. Got cymbals smashing, the room's breathing. And I got these little guitars. That's a problem. So if people want you to do certain things, but they're not prepared to give you the tools to do it with, how the hell are you going to do it? You can't. Sometimes you can get too big. This is why balance is so important when you start. If you're starting off with a very unbalanced mix, like the drums are really smoking and the bass is really got a lot of girth, a lot of amount of bend, but your guitars, no matter what you do, let's say they're plug-in guitars. Mm-hmm. By the way, this is what a plug-in guitar looks like. Make them louder. You ever try to make plug-in guitars louder? Mm-hmm. It doesn't. It folds down into itself. Why? Because there's no harmonic distortion. There's no amplifier. There's nothing to grab onto. It's numbers. That's all it is. This doesn't get louder. It just gets fizzier. Once the amp is in place, you blend in the plug-in to give the frequencies that are missing from the guitar. It's not brain surgery. The minute you depend on a plug-in for a guitar sound in a rock band, you're done. you're finished because there's nothing there. And I don't care what anybody says. I've never heard anything that's a substitute for an amplifier. Plugin is supposed to be used, this is me, I'm very outspoken on it, to help your guitar sound, to augment what you have, to add mid-range. The first thing you're going to do with a real guitar sound is you're going to start shaving the fizz out. That's the first thing you're going to do. Why? Because it creates havoc with everything. So that's very, very dangerous. With samples, you're basically mixing like this. It's like building blocks that just keep getting higher, and that's a no end to that. As opposed to taking the tree and you pair it into a shape. That's different. You pairing it. But there's a saying, I want everything louder than everything else. This is what people say, and that's what happens when eventually your mix will fold into itself and you will fold into your mix with it.
How to deal with the comments?
When you finish a mix is the scariest part of your day. I mean, you go run it off. Engineer goes right to the console, presses record, and off she goes. Over to the computer. Next thing that happens is you look at your computer, turn it on, and you got an MP3. Never send anybody a wave. It goes to China. It goes to Spain. It goes to Brooklyn. Wherever it goes, it's now out of your hands. And then you've got what we call the burn-in. The burn-in time is the time between you press send and the artist listens to it. The rule of thumb, I'm going to talk about a lot of things people don't talk about, is that the longer it takes to get an answer back is the less they like it. This is extremely common. Why? Because if somebody loves something, they're going to call you right away and go, oh my God, it sounds amazing. So you look at your watch, set the timer, 5:30, mix goes, 6:30. Oh, you've texted them. I sent the mix. Okay. So the mix goes now to the band, to the manager, to the label. Maybe the label gets it before the band. Sometimes they ask for it. They get it. Now your biggest problem in life, something that's not talked about, discussed, understood, but being on the record company side, I'd like to help. The question becomes very simple. Whose comments matter and why? I'm going to go around the clock and I'm going to show you who's who. The mixer says, my comments are the most important because I'm the guy you hired to mix it. So don't listen to anybody else. I've done this before. As somebody once said, let me consult my Grammys. And the artist says, but wait a minute. I didn't really write the song like this. It was not my concept to have these chorus background vocals gone. But you've taken them out, and that's part of my magic of the song. And the label goes, I told you to edit it. It's too long. Why is it so long? We want it shorter, and the artist should only be hearing it that way. I can't believe you let them hear it and without the way I heard it. And now we have opposing opinions with the manager trying to stand between the artist and the label because they want to keep their record deal, don't want to piss off the record label. At the same time, they want the artist to say, you're supposed to be representing me. And how do they deal with the mixer? All of these people have different agendas. And so the simple question becomes one thing. Who is right? Who do you listen to? Who is going to take the responsibility of making the call? This is interesting because the best records always work where everybody's on the same page. Mm-hmm. And how do you get on the same page? It's very simple. It's not that complicated. You have this discussion before you mix the track, not after you mix the track. So if someone's mixing something and they have not lyric sheet in front of them, they know what the song is about. They have not spoken to the producer. Is it okay if I take liberties with some of these things? No. Okay, got it, understand. Is it okay if I take some things out? Yes, I'm open to that. Maybe I've over-recorded. Phone the record label. What are you looking for this song to be? Is this a single? Is this an album track? Do you want it aggressive? How do you see the group? Do you see this light? Is it more middle of the road, or is it more heavy? The manager rarely gets involved. Why? Because they're going to go with whatever the label and the artist wants. You want managers know better. Usually they stay out. Once a manager jumps in, I used to be a singer in a band. I'm a manager. Now you got a real problem. With me, they're going to run into a problem. You're in a brick wall with me. Why? Because I can tell you every chord in your song, what key it's in, what the tempo is, how much stuff is in there shouldn't be there, and how to convince them that why it needs to go or why it needs to stay. And I'm open enough to do everything you want me to do until you bury your own mix. And I will bury it for you with you, just so that you can ask me to take you out of this fire. Not because I'm right. It's because at a certain point, I don't believe what I want is necessarily true. And I don't believe what they want is necessarily true either. But I know what the song wants. So I go with that. Now, am I wrong? Absolutely. But that's my gut instinct. By the feedback I get from the artist and by the label, I know long before whether it's going to be a successful venture. It's only when there's big surprises that you've got a problem. So it gets back to, how do you know when the song is finished? How do you know when it's done? How do I know? When I sit back and I listen, I go, well, is every fader moving? Yup. Good. Okay. We're done. Oh, wait a minute. No, not necessarily. Maybe you should leave the room and listen. So all of these risks we take, you're never sure. And once they come back with those comments and they're hurtful, they're hurtful. Why? Because I don't like your kick and snare, but everything else is okay. Well, wow. Then you hate the mix. You hate the song. You hate me. I'm ruining your band. Or you'll get the singer, the guitar player, the bass player in the group. They'll love it. But the keyboard player and they hate it. No, this is nothing. What have you done? Oh, dude, no. And then, so now, this is exactly what happens. I'm going to tell everybody what really happens. You get through mix 1, great. You get through mix 2, phenomenal. You get to mix 3, your plane just took off into outer space. Why? Because whoever doesn't like it knows that ship left the port. And you and the band and the creative people involved have taken off on the rocket, and everybody else is going to get left behind, because that's how that rolls with the momentum of the songs. The next thing that happens is song 7, song 8. You've got you and the 3 people in the band that are still there, and one of them drops off, and you get to song 10, and now it's just you and one person. This is how every record goes. Every single time. At the beginning, everybody wants to be there. They want to be a part of it until they get their ideas knocked down. Then they realize really quickly, wait a minute, I don't really have a voice. This is who deserves the voice, the person that wrote the song. That's how I view it. The label, they might want something different. Maybe they have no idea what the band should be. Well, how do you know who to listen to? You got to make the label. You want to work for the label again. See, I'm going to say something crazy, that I don't really care who's working at the label, because I know one thing. The only guarantee you're ever going to have at a label, if you work there, is you're going to get fired. There's certain A&R people in my life that have affected me in a huge way, that are so talented, that get it, that are still doing it. They're that good. It's a hard job to stay in for 30 years, 20 years. I did it. I was lucky. So the question is, should you be scared of a record label? No, you should be friends with the record label and tell them what you love. Bring them to the studio. Show them how you work. But you've got to appease everybody at a certain point. And sometimes you can't. You have to do what's right for the song and the artist. And that is complicated from a political standpoint.
So let's talk about lyric sheets when you mix and what.
Lyric sheets. Okay, yeah. Before I mix, I love to know what I'm mixing. And I like to relate to it way more as a songwriter. Sometimes artists don't want to tell you. They say, just you'll figure it out. But sometimes if a song is special to somebody and it means something to them, I have to get that feeling, even if it's fake, for the next 8 hours. I have to get what I call inside the song. It's a bit heady. I know I'm going there, but I feel like I have to attach myself to it emotionally to really understand, to put myself in that position. So I kind of become the song psychiatrist as I'm working through it, as I'm listening to the lyrics and how they unfold, the story is being told. I have to make sure that I hear it clearly. And sometimes as mixers, we like to hear vocals very loud. We like to hear drums very loud, and that always happens. And how we surround things and we put them in a frame like a photographer. Sometimes they don't need to be like that. Sometimes they, if we listen to a Joni Mitchell record, for example, we don't understand every word or every melody, but we know what she's talking about, and that's important. So that's called getting inside the song with a lyric sheet in front of you, and you're reading these lyrics, and you care about this song as if it was your own. This is when things change drastically in the studio, because you can identify, and you try and identify emotionally with the song, and not just looking at, this is the guitar track, this is the bass track, okay, let's make this, and this, that. Who cares? People don't clap at the end of a concert because you got the notes right. They clap because it feels good. And so the lyrics and the melody, even if there's no chorus, like take a song like Maggie May, which is a great example by Rod Stewart. There is no chorus, but you listen and you read that lyric down, you would know right away. Wake up, Maggie, I've got something to say to you. Okay, that's how the song starts. What has he got to say? All of a sudden it's then, you know there's a story that's going to happen. I gave you everything I had. You left me feeling alone. All of a sudden there's this feeling of emptiness. So I have to make this mix feel empty. And if I turn the lights off at the end of the mix and it doesn't make me feel like that, I feel like I've screwed the song. And that's bad. So there is an emotional attachment, even though it's only momentary, even though it's for the day. It's much like somebody giving you their child to take care of for the day. You're going to be careful what you feed it, how you're going to, if it's cold, if it's warm, if it's got something to play with, without that human part of it, the music is lost, and the mixer is lost, and all those things you can technically do, again, to try and make that happen are fake. And this is why there's certain mixes, you and I, just now outside talking about Slave to the Rhythm by Grace Jones, and both of our eyes lit up. We looked at each other, we went, yes, why is that song special? Well, it's Grace Jones, and she's a phenomenal artist, and she's a phenomenal model and a phenomenal character. Well, you can only put her in the frame of something grandiose, something wonderful, something groovy, something hitting you emotionally. And that song hits you. Every section of that song that goes down connects to me immediately.
Absolutely.
And so whatever I'm doing, I would stop everything I'm doing and I would spend 5 minutes to listen to it, because every time I hear it, of course, the same story, I hear something new. This is, again, backing to my 8-second rule. Again, it's how you build something in your head. If you make it flatline, and that's mixing, that's the difference between a good mixer and a bad mixer. It's making the music go with the emotion. And this is very difficult to do every day, but this is what you have to learn. It's not a technical thing. It's part of it, but it's not it. The song has to be realized with the idea, in the way it was written, in the mood of the moment. And so that's the responsibility that we have with other people's songs.
Let's talk about having people in the room when you mix.
Yesterday, when we did the video, you were in the room. This is the first time I've ever had somebody stand that close to me while I'm mixing in my whole career. This is within 3 feet, and you're looking at me and you're watching me, and I'm extremely aware of you there. Not because I don't trust you or I don't like you, or it's the whole proximity of getting between me and this console, because I have to bond with the console and I don't really know what I'm going to do. It's all from experience of other things I've done, but now somebody's watching you. When an artist comes into a room and they sit at this couch or they sit there where they do, and they like to watch you because they want to see what's going to happen to their song, It's almost like opening a package at Christmas, but they get to see the wrapping at the end. They'll come in for the last hour. Or some people want to be a producer, an engineer, a mixer, and they'll sit there for the whole thing. Now, I've had many, many people come from England that call me and say, "Can I watch you mix?" And I said, "Yes, you can, but you cannot say anything to me, because if you do, you might say something that will bother me, and then I won't be able to focus. I have to get out of here and do something and then come back. But if you do it while I'm in this room, the room is sacred, like a church chapel or whatever you want, whatever your religion is. It's like there's certain things you can do in here, and there's certain things, if you do them, will ruin the whole thing. Like if I turn around and I look and there's two people in a room in the same band, and I do something that's questionable, even to me, and they look at each other and one goes like that, I don't feel like I can express myself that well anymore. If they get really excited and they love it, I go, "Oh, they like it, so that's good." I've had a lot of artists that want to be there, and I have artists that do not want to be there. But the thing is, when the artist wants to be there because they want to learn, or they want to ask you why you're doing it, or they want to cheerlead you into helping you to do their work, this is fantastic. It's fantastic. So yesterday, when you were standing next to me, and I realized that there were going to be other engineers and other mixers seeing what I do, which I know in my own mind is kind of crazy, because I'm grabbing all of these faders in some strange way to create something that I've already done, which is even weirder because I've never done that either. Like, I've done a recall, but it's already come back to where I started. I don't change the whole mix. That's not a recall. It was very different for me to have you knowing, I know that you know what you're doing. I felt extremely naked. And I felt not compromised, but I felt, when I got home last night and I thought about what we had done, I felt like I had embarrassed myself, because when I do this, I don't do it with anybody. And I never, ever, ever turn around to somebody and say, "Do you think that's good?" Because I know that whatever they tell me, it doesn't matter, because I know that it's going to be me that makes that decision. Because if they say to me, "Yeah, it sounds great, but I don't think it is," I'm not going to listen to them anyway. Or if I think it's great and they think it's great, maybe there's something I missed. You see, this is how I do it. It's crazy. So having somebody like this close to me, I know people that are instructors do this all the time, but I am insecure about playing anything unfinished to somebody that doesn't show the song realized in its form. And so to play for somebody finished is so different, so beautiful, and they love it. And they go, and of course they make a couple of things a couple of times, and then they make a face. It's like, yeah, that it goes by in 1 second. And of course, at the end of the song, there's only 3 things. That's it. And you go, "Okay, what are they?" And they go, "Do this and this and this." And you go, "Okay, is it good? Perfect now." You see, this is fantastic. This is a moment of beauty.
Let's do a quick something about too many tracks and too much stereo tracks.
Producers love to produce, and they love to have gear, and they love to have plugins, they love to have outboard gear and consoles that look like this, the ultimate console, although people would argue it's a Neve. It's wonderful to have all this gear. And when you have a lot of gear, you want to record a lot, because the more things you can record, the more exciting. Let's put the kick through this Neve. Let's put the snare through the Neve. Let's put the guitars. Let's add a bit of, we got Massenburgs. George Massenburg doesn't even know that these exist. Let's add a little bit of, shelf 10, bring out the cymbals. That's what they're good for, isn't it? Vocals, things that don't even, this Massenburg is genius. This is genius. Fantastic. Okay. But this is the color that it makes. Why are things so great? Because they're musical. This excites us as producers. So we want to record multiple tracks. Lots of guitars, lots of keyboards. We're doing everything today in stereo. Left, right, everything. We're stacking stereo tracks across the console, but we forget about positioning, where they sit in the mix. How are you going to hear everything? It's all left, right. You're not. You have no separation. Well, you have to EQ. Okay. You have to change where it sits. We put all the things left to right. There they are, all left and right. Then we have the kick, the snare, the vocal, and the bass, all sitting on top of each other, like one big stack. And we imagine that they all have to work together. All of those four things dead on top of each other. And all of these genius production ideas all left, right. So my question is, okay, what's here? What's there? And how do you make this? By the way, this is the center of the, like, this is the big part of the pie. Half the pie, we think of half a pie. Well, where's all this? Well, I don't know. What is there? I know. Let's put some more stuff on there. So as producers, we have come to know we don't know arrangements sometimes. And so we have to be safe by over recording just to make sure if I need it. It's like you're going on a trip. You better bring 15 gallons of water in case you get lost. And you get out on the trip and you don't get lost, but your back is killing you because, so it's like, okay, mixer, here is my production. It's amazing. And of course, they're listening, and then you listen to their monitor mix. The first thing you're going to do is put up their monitor mix, their rough mix. And of course, it's a freaking mess. Why? They don't even know what they recorded anymore. They don't even remember what they recorded. And there's a lot of it. So we all know now that the greatest mixes are simple, and that the beauty of some things are within not making things so dense and populated. And we start to remove things and think of the things that we love that help the song. Well, every time somebody hands me a mix to do, there's always 50% of it that has nothing to do with anything. It's just something that they decided to do because they could. But that's where understanding music and what works with the song is good. Because I cannot tell you how many times I've taken 20 to 30 tracks out of one of those kinds of songs and sent the mix off and have people say to me, it sounds incredible, and never once mentioned those tracks that were absolutely a waste of space.
Oh, yeah.
So the question is, how do you know what to take out? And you're very scared in case someone goes, dude, the bells, where are they on the second chorus? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I took them out. What are you talking about? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Dude, they were I recorded them. Now, you don't want to do that. So what do I take out? Things that you can't hear. You would never know. So once you get past the vocals and the drums, which are the loudest things, how you paint that palette from a mixing standpoint is very, very dangerous. Now you've got a piano left, right, and you've got guitars left, right. Well, how do you know? How are you gonna compete with ranges like that are right on top of each other? How do you do that? When you hear Meatloaf and you hear Steinman and you hear the piano and you hear the guitar, how many tracks are there? There's what, hundreds? You don't even know, but you can hear it. How is it that happened? How does he do that? Very clever. It's basically not using everything all the time. So to get to it, I start by taking everything out of my mix. I try to start very simple with the drums and the vocal. I do not listen to any guitars. I listen to the keyboards, if I have any. I listen to the percussion. And then once I get my vocal and my drums together, the bass comes in. So I try to build it like I was building a house. This is the basement. If my basement is not solid, everything I put on top of it is going to fall. Either way, I can see the bedroom falling in on itself. And that moment where you're sitting at the console, and there these keyboard tracks are, and you go like this, and you go, no, what do I do now? What do I do? And now you're in trouble. So now you have to create some kind of a way to get this all problem solving, So it's EQ. Okay, maybe it's panning. Maybe it's one side. Every single pre-chorus I do, if you listen to my records, I pair to mono as I try and get them as mono as I can by cutting stuff. I'll have one keyboard in and one piano and one guitar in on one side, and I'll try and bring them in close like this. Every chorus has to open up. It has to bloom. And if my pre-chorus is as big as my chorus, I already know exactly what's going to happen. My chorus is going to fall in on itself. So I try to minimize all of the sections. When I'm doing rock music, for example, I never go to crash cymbals just because the way I produce, I love the open hi-hat at the beginning of every single chorus. I find that if you go to the crash cymbal, it raises that extra level. So I'm very, very aware sonically of what I'm giving myself. And to be quite honest, I'm actually mixing as I produce a record. There's no question in my mind that I do not try and present myself with problems, because I already know what I would do. I would be the guy, David Bendeth, that would take it out, not create this problem. So I try to head off these at the pass. Other times, if you're doing certain music, you kind of got to have those things and you have to work your way around them. But mixing and producing, there's a huge advantage, which is controlling what you give yourself to mix. And every time I do something, an artist looks at me and says, I said, too much. They go, well, you don't know. I said, we'll record it. But I'm telling you right now, the chances are you won't hear that in the mix. So I'm very careful.
Mixing at low levels.
Especially when you're doing rock. So if you're mixing loud, and I've worked with a lot of different mixers in my career that really love to pump it, feel that rock music going through their veins. I can't be in the same room as them, because after a half an hour, it's painful. And it wears me down, and it makes me tired, and it makes me feel angry, especially if there's really a lot of guitars. With an SSL, we all know how this thing works. And it's always been like, you just touch it and you can only hear one side. In fact, I think they make plugins that do that, right? They do. They make it so that you just turn a little bit and you only hear one side, which is the way the console's always been. There's a unity gain issue within the console, but it's become normal. I don't think this is doing it, maybe. I like to make things really loud at low levels. This is how I test my mixing, because if it sounds really loud, it means I've done the right moves. And I'm off center. I never mix in center, and I know people love headphones. I use Grados and I love them, and I'll listen back to check a mix, but that's it once. I won't keep listening to it. I sometimes listen to pods, but you don't really hear exactly what I'm hearing in the room here. And so I feel like they lie, but I think YouTube lies, and I think Spotify lies, and I think iTunes has their own algorithm right on iTunes and their own compression. And I think every car has a limiter on it. And that's why no cars go back to the stereo store anymore, because there's a limiter, a governor, if you will. I have a governor in the studio too. It's called my ears. And if I'm mixing for 8 hours, I want to make sure. So what do? I do the same thing every single day when I mix. I get the mix, I mix it at a low level, but I only mix in sections. So for example, I would do the intro, the verse, and the chorus, and then I will stop, usually take a break for like 20 minutes. Before I leave the room, I crank it as loud as I like, and I'll listen to it once loud or twice loud, and then leave the room, come back in, maybe listen to it one more time, and then I'm back down to practically, I mix at a level that you and I could have this conversation. It really helps me to listen to music, because I have to force myself to listen to it. The first thing you're going to notice is the hi-hat. If you don't hear the hi-hat, usually their mix is screwed. The bass, you're not going to hear on NS10s. That's going to lie to you all the time. That's headphones, and they are going to lie to you as well. These big speakers, well, they're really going to lie to you. So what is accurate? I'll tell you what's accurate. Knowing the sweet spots of where you can push subs. And in hip hop, especially if you're in a big room, everyone likes to listen loud, highly dangerous. But it's experimenting. And so mixing low is obviously easy on your brain, easier to hear the music, and not sitting in the center is the greatest thing in the world. And looking at speakers is even the stupidest thing in the world. I sometimes like to listen to music with my eyes closed. People sit there and they're like this, like this, like looking at the speakers, like something's going to happen. There's a saying, let's see what it sounds like. Let's see what it sounds like. What does this mean? That we have, ears where our eyes are? No, our ears are here. The time-align thing, I like to listen. This is really strange too, but I will go into that corner where that tape machine is, and I will face my face to the wall, and I will turn it up, and I will listen to it so that the sound has to come around and into my ear like this. And it gives it usually a 10 millisecond. Here's another trick I do. When I'm doing guitars with a guitar player, I move them to the back of the room. I've moved guitar players in this place right into that lobby there and have them play, and they play perfectly in time. I give them the own delay. So if I have to figure out how far to put them. So it's the same thing when I'm mixing. If I'm at the back of the room and everything's not time aligned properly, I can tell. And then I come and start listening to it and see what I have to move.
Mixing against other mixers in battles.
This is happening more and more, mixing against different people. And some of them are my friends, which is really even worse because the question becomes, is the A&R person or the label or the artist or the producer going to tell you what they're looking for when you're up against 3 or 4 people? The answer is no. You do it the way you hear it, and we'll decide whether we like it. So you're being judged based on no lyric sheets, no nothing. The whole thing is crazy because you're removing the human factor. Does it happen every day? Of course, people will hire 3, 4 mixers to do the same thing, or just tell them, you got to try out. I've had bands that I've worked with triple platinum records have me try out for their next one. Well, maybe they feel they want something different. So maybe they feel they owe you the obligation to see what you would do. It's very competitive. And when you're up against great people, you have to anticipate what they're going to do. And sometimes you go in the exact opposite direction. A couple of projects I've done, I've taken off all of the reverbs and delays and removed them from my mix and delivered the mix with nothing on it, knowing that everybody else is going to be doing their little magic. This is how you can tell it's me stuff. I mean, nothing. That methodology is derived from giving the artist nothing on it, but making it still sound amazing, and then giving them the option to imagine what happens when we put other things on. And you see if they have an imagination. And a bunch of times I've done it, and I've been hired just based on the fact that I didn't do anything. That's being extremely competitive because And they say, well, there must be something wrong with David Bendeth. He's just given me my song back with nothing on it. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. That's what it is. And there's always a part going, oh, now everybody else, by the time they add in all their crap, the whole song is gone. Who knows what could happen? So I've done different things to get projects.
Why haven't you done this before?
I haven't done this before. I've come up to the line. A couple of times I wanted to do it myself and just shoot it myself and sell it myself. And I thought, you don't know anything about video. But the most obvious reason for me never doing this before is because I don't mix for a living. And the people that do this every day, I admire them for their stamina. Not just because of what they do technically and knowing about all the gear and learning all about EQ and effects and speakers and consoles, but really because politically, they also I know they have to deal with the label and they have to deal with the artist and the manager. And it was something I made a decision to do. At a certain point, if I look at my discography, I would say more than 55% of my work is mixing. And the other half is producing and writing. But I knew that I wasn't going to be a gunslinger mixer because it didn't interest me as much as being a producer and a writer. So I never felt authentic enough to do a mixing video because I knew that there was so much more involved to mixing a track than just receiving a bunch of files and throwing them up on a console, that there was a whole sort of method to how you do it. And if you did it the same way every day, you'd get the same results, the same compressors, the same EQs, you're using the same goal. This is tried and true. It reminded me of the Holiday Inn. You know the artwork before you get there. You know where the beds are going to be. You know what the color of the bedspreads are going to be. And you know what? I sleep at the Holiday Inn pretty good. And it's nice. It's only $110 a night, and you pay the tax, and you sleep, and you're gone. And you wake up, and they give you a bowl of cereal, and you're good. It's the Holiday Inn. Or it's the Marriott. The Marriott's pretty good, right? I mean, you go into the Marriott, you know what the same person and the room is, that's a nice room, and the bathroom and everything's the toilet paper's a little V in it. It's like, okay, stop. I don't want to do that. I want a boutique. If I mix something, it's because of a different reason. Do I understand why you have to do that? Absolutely. People get a sound. People hire people because they've got a sound. I haven't done these shows before because I never thought I had a sound, and I was really proud of not having a sound. It was important to me to be able to go do Bruce Hornsby's record and then go do Kill Switch Engage, all in the same day, week, whatever it was. To me, my favorite people were people that could do anything. Trevor Horn, we just talked about. Mm-hmm. He can do anything, and it's always incredible. That was what I aspired to be. Or Quincy Jones could do a Quincy Jones album, then do a Michael Jackson record, then do a Brothers Johnson record, and none of them sounded like each other, but there was a Quincy Jones element that made it just that little thing. But it wasn't Quincy Jones to death. This is the beauty of a Bob Ezrin, Peter Gabriel, Alice Cooper, Rod Stewart, Kiss. Those records don't sound like each other. Bob Ezrin understands Pink Floyd, The Wall, and Kiss. He can do both. And so that was my aspiration. These guys never became full-time mixers because they enjoyed cutting drums or whatever they did way more. So it was the monotony of anything that would put me in a bad place. And to be honest with you, again, I haven't done one of these videos before because I never thought that my voice was interesting enough for other people to learn anything from in regards to what they might want to grow up to be a mixer. Okay, I don't think anybody can learn to be a mixer.
Tell me about that.
I think it's impossible. I think the only way to become a mixer is to do what I did and everybody else did, was make 1,000 mistakes and fail miserably to the point where you suck and everybody around you thinks you suck, and you suck. And how much you want to get up off of the ground and do it again. It's like getting beaten up in the Marines, right? When they do that thing and you run into the wall and then they make you do it again. You're like, do you really want to be, the SEAL unit? Well, you're gonna have to stay underwater for 3 hours. How much do you want to be a SEAL? Right. So that's what this is about. With mixing, it's very difficult to be a great mixer if you're 30 years old and you've not been through 10,000 mixes. I would say that any of my success as a mixer has been derived from absolute failure on every level and miserable, terrible mixes that I would never want anyone to hear. And I'm embarrassed. And I love to mix. I just wouldn't want to do it every day. Actually, I wouldn't want to do anything every day. I would miss songwriting if I didn't do it. I would miss producing. I miss my guitar when I don't have it in my hands every day. I have to do them all at some point, but I feel like going back and forth with them, it gives me the ability to, like Greg Wells. Greg Wells is such a talent. You hear him play piano, then he plays drums, then he picks up a guitar, and then he loves to engineer, and then he loves to mix, and he's doing it all in the same place. I'm not that talented. Certainly, Greg Wells is an amazing keyboard player and a songwriter. Let's not even go there. It's ridiculous. So he's like a quadruple threat. So I always wanted to see myself in that light and not get too stuck on my addiction to perfection of mixing, which I think I would go crazy if I did it by myself all day, every day. So I haven't done this before because I didn't feel qualified unless I could explain the rest of what I do. Some people love my mixes, some people hate them. There's lots of good reasons for both. I hate some of them too, but I think it's an ever evolving thing. And you have to realize that you can always be better at what you do. And the minute you get stuck in that Holiday Inn and you're no longer going to ever get into the Ritz-Carlton, the Trevor Horns, the Quincy Jones, the Bruce Swedins, the Arif Mardens, and today, 40. We'll go to 40. We can start talking about all the guys today, Mike Deans, and the people that are incredible at what they do, that are just going to get better and better and better. This is just the beginning. So unless I could tell the story like I have, it wasn't worth it.
I think you're highly qualified. Everyone has their own version of what sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in my career trying to explain things to engineers that I've worked with, even the ones I've worked with for years. And no matter what I did, they didn't understand because it was in my head. So how good are you at explaining what's in your head is very difficult. A lot of people do it through colors. Can you make, David, I'll do a mix. Can you make this section more green or more red? What does that mean? Well, I know what it means, but do you know what red means? No. But that's funny. When we get back to the video, if you show me a movie of what you want to hear, I bet you I can make it sound like that. You see, this is where what's in our head, and I think colors have a lot to do with it. We see colors. Everybody has their own idea of what sounds great, which is very unfortunate because certain people have shit taste, and no matter what they think sounds good is garbage. And I deal with that a lot. Like I've had somebody ask me to make something sound like garbage and something I hate, and I've done it just because they're the client. But I kind of feel like, why did you hire me? You should have just gotten them to do it. Well, I love your drum sounds. I was like, oh, you want to take my drum sounds and add it with their garbage? Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. So I feel it is very, very complicated now because everybody has their own idea of greatness. The problem is, for me, and again, I'm going to sound really old, the records of my generation and older sounded incredible to me, and they don't sound like that anymore. And so how the hell would you know what sounds great? Because you have never listened. Now, what's changed is people are listening to those old records and they're going, wait a minute, Bob Marley, Exodus, could that record save the world sonically? The answer, yes. Yes, it could. And I divide everything up in my mind into 10 records. Yeah. And those 10 records dictate everything to me. If the song I'm working on does not have an element of those 10 records, then it's missing something altogether.
Let's have the 10 records.
My 10 records are Sgt. Pepper's, just because George Martin put strings on it that no one could ever put on in a million years. Flugelhorns, everything. That's a record that changed music. Actually, that's where I'm going to go. These records weren't just good records. They changed the music forever. Bitches Brew, Miles Davis. The conglomeration of rock and jazz, these 11 people sitting around in a room, how it was recorded, how many takes they did. This is absolutely genius and changed music, changed the way we feel about music. The Sex Pistols, never mind the bollocks. Malcolm McLaren, you're looking at a band that records a record on a Friday, masters it on a Saturday, and releases it on a Monday. God Save the Queen. Sid Vicious. It doesn't get any more animalistic than that record. It's a fuck you record. And it took not only music, but clothing and everything else to the next stratosphere as far as rock goes. That record changed music, and that record I use as an energy thing. If it doesn't remind me of the attitude of that God Save the Queen or Pretty Vacant, then I've lost the plot. Michael Jackson, Thriller. What can you say? 5 videos, 6 videos, big hits, incredible production, film coming into it, sonic sound effects coming into it. It's a game changer. Changed music forever. Changed the way we think about soul music, rock music. We don't know where it's going. It's blurring every line there is to blur. And everybody loves it. The best of Earth, Wind, and Fire. It's just, every song blows my mind. All of the harmonies, the soul, the feel. That record, to me, Massenburg, that era, the melody, it just leaves me breathless. Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland. The way the drums are on one side and the shaker is louder than the guitar. And the guitar, and Eddie's got the guitar going like this the whole time. And Voodoo Child. and the sounds that are coming out of that guitar, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I'm in hell. And it feels so right. All Along the Watchtower, Bob Dylan cover on that record. All of that record and what it stands for changed music. It introduced psychedelic music, blues music with a singer that nobody could touch. And to this day, no one can still touch on guitar. That's my take. I hear Jimmy, although I listen to Band of Gypsies, that's my favorite Jimi Hendrix record. But that record and the way it sat in the mix, when I listen to it, you can hear that shaker. It's going through your body. And the way that his vocal is on, the drums are on this side, and the whole way it breathes, you would never be able to do that today. Genius. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting into, Garth Brooks, Rope in the Wind. Introduced everybody in the world to country music at the same time. It's a genius record, clever record. Do I listen to it every day? No, but do I recognize it for what its stature has done? Yes, absolutely, no question. It's a genius record. Elvis, I worked on that record for 6 months. The recordings were amazing. They were done in churches, down alleys with microphones, and down rooms, and the whole way they mixed the records in mono and stereo, and then everybody playing at the same time. Any record Elvis does, you can learn everything you need to learn about sound and guitar and the voice. It's going to change everything. And I was never a big fan of Elvis till I did that record. I wasn't allowed to be in my house. It was Frank. Oh, NWA. Like, I'll never forget the first I heard NWA. I was like, okay, wait a minute. This is riveting. These lyrics, this is coming right out of Compton. And the production and the way it was put together, it was like music was going here, and all of a sudden, this record comes in and makes everybody take a left turn at the same time. Why? Because it sounded modern. The lyrics were mind-boggling. And of course, every artist on that record is a genius. And so you have to say, if you don't like NWA, I know that record changed music, and that record is a model paradigm for hip hop and for lyrics and for reflecting the mirror on society of what reality is. And so that record, I can listen to anytime, and it blows my mind. Scritti Politti, that's up there for me, although it didn't continue, but sonically, to this day, I still haven't heard anything as complicated. I like it because it's complicated. Exodus, Bob Marley, taking an extremely strong cultural approach to get up, stand up. All of that record is a world message delivered by somebody that understood the world, had toured the world, had Al Anderson, the guitar player from Montclair. I've known him since he was 17. I met him in England. He was the guitar player. That whole band played incredibly well together, but the song and the message was so powerful that it could be played in any city in the world, and anybody that was in that audience had to get up off their feet. And so that changed the way we thought about Rosicrucians and Jamaicans, and it became, wait a minute, this is world music. So that record gives me a certain feeling. And there you go. I know everybody out there is going to say, yeah, Nirvana. I know. But I never bought into it. And I do love Nirvana. I do. I just didn't think that it changed the world musically. I just felt it changed the clothing line pretty well. But a lot of people disagree, and I respect them for doing that.
It changed the music business.
Yes.
Summing and the issues in the box.
Now everybody's working in the box, and there's gear to compensate for all of the things, although I'm still wondering what makes a great SSL plugin. What is the number one factor that makes an SSL plugin great?
The best possible UI.
The best possible UI. That's important, right? How many SSL plugins are there now for a 4000 series G+?
I can't count that high.
Why would you pick one over another?
Marketing.
Marketing. Imagine if we bought cars based on marketing. or we bought houses based on how well they were marketed to us. I watch and I listen to Spike Stent, and he's incredible. And he's gone from this big computer, like everybody, not like this, down to this small SSL. And I'm like, wow, you know what? He's figured out, because he's that good. He's a genius. He's phenomenal. How to get that sound the same, because the sound is not on here, or it's in here. So he's manipulating it to literally, he probably copied himself on the big console and did on the small one with everything. And okay, well, that's pretty close. I bet you that's 95%. Hey, this is it. Next. And then now he's perfecting that. And so you watch these hits, Harry Styles, and you're listening to them. Man, it sounds like it's been done. Like it's not in a room with nothing hardly in it. So today you can do it. It's not about gear, but I don't think you can do it unless you have someone like Spike Stent's experience mixing, because I don't think anyone could just walk into a situation like Spike Stent's room. I bet you and this should happen, a mixer should go into some other mixer's room and mix a track and see how well they do. That's it. The thing is, I bet you certain mixers would make it sound exactly the same.
No matter what room they're in.
No matter what room they're in.
I guarantee
all you have to do is get the right monitors.
That's it.
So my point is to everybody that would be looking at this is stop thinking that it's the gear or the plugins or the Mac. It's never that. That's a part of it. Yeah, you want everything that's fast. You need a fast processor to make your 56 plugins go perfectly. Or you need, reliable power or reliable outlets. Daniel Lamb once told me the only thing important about a recording studio is how many outlets are in the room. You always need one more, no matter how many you have. Daniel Lamb once said that to me. I never forget when I went to my studio, the first thing I did was put in 20 more outlets in this control room. But that aside, I think, don't rely on gear to get you through it. Don't rely on gear to go by what you hear, and always compare yourself to other things. Listen to other things. Put them on in the studio to see if you're close or in the ballpark. And if you're not, expect to not be competitive. The only way to learn anything is to screw up royally, and it's great. It's the best thing. But once you come up with something that's great, don't stick with it.
When is a mix complete, and when do you and the artist know that when it's time to stop?
When the mix is really complete is when the artist approves it. Again, you're not sure who to listen to, but usually if you talk to everybody and do your job and communicate with everybody, you're going to know when it's done, when you feel you've done all you can. Now, a lot of us that are very deep-seated in our thoughts about how far we're going to go with things make the classic mistake of going too far. There's something I like to do when I'm in the computer, and I was on my own console, which was go back 20 minutes ago to see where it was. You'll always find that it's more aggressive, at least if I'm doing a rock record. So that was the biggest mistake. You're honing and you're honing and you're pairing and you're pairing and you're smoothing and you're smoothing all of the edges until your elbows that were sticking out are like this now. They're gone. But isn't this what you really wanted to do when you started it, to give it the edge? If it's that kind of a song, yeah. So the worst songs for overmixing are the heavy songs, because usually they're in a pretty good state pretty early on. If you pay attention to those elbows and you want to hit someone in the face. Knowing when to stop is when you've mixed it, you've taken 15 to 20 minutes off, you've come back in the room, and you get the feeling that it's fantastic, as good as you can do. But then sometimes I always leave 5 to 10% knowing that I probably missed something, and I should be prepared and accepting of the artist and the A&R person to tell me what it is I've missed. And so when is it complete? When it's released to the public.
If you could sit down with your younger self, what one piece of audio engineering advice or music making advice would you give?
I wish I would have just told myself to calm down and be patient and be careful about what you say, because you don't know what you're doing yet enough. So speaking out of turn, not asking enough questions, not recognizing myself to be in an opportunity where I could really learn, wanting to show someone else how great I was, instead of listening to what they had to say and learn something from them. I wish I could just stop being so excited. You know, I would say I couldn't have been more passionate, but sometimes when you're passionate, you lose the plot. Stay passionate, but don't let it overtake you. You still got to keep your wits about you and know what you're saying and what you're doing. And you have to own everything you do, own everything you say. And that's not easy.